Welcome back to Obscurus Gaming, and we have a Wild West themed versus for you today. The games Dueling It Out or El Hijo, a Wild West game for the Switch, but also available on most other consoles, and Desperados 3 for Series X, PC, and PlayStation. To sum it up, El Hijo is a stealth-based adventure game where you play as a small child and his mother over 30 levels in an attempt to reunite them. Desperados 3, on the other hand, is a full-blown tactical real-time strategy game with 16 very long, detailed, and at times difficult levels, all thematically set in the Wild West, with several characters who weave in and out of each other's stories. In this video, we will be reviewing both games and taking a look at what makes them similar, in some ways, even with such different intended audiences.
I bet you'll forget all about your old life after you pop out a few children.
Tempting, but I must decline.
What the hell are you doing, Kate?
Just trying to be convincing.
The story of El Hijo is told through several cutscenes, visually portraying a basic story of a mother and child being separated and attempting to reunite with one another. There is no voice acting, but stylistically is done well enough to understand the simple premise using cartoons. Desperados 3 takes place as a prequel to the previous games, which I've never played, but tells the story of John Cooper and 4 other over-the-top old-school Wild West kind of movie-inspired characters who all have various personal agendas throughout the universe. I didn't find the story all that interesting, but the way the characters interact and talk with one another is super entertaining and sets a fantastic premise if you are a fan of anything related to the Wild West. El Hijo spends a good portion of the game in temples and monasteries, which to me felt really out of place for the Wild West, but is integral to the story. In Desperados 3, you will go to much more traditional locations, but they are fleshed out enough to be authentically unique, and I really enjoyed the theme in Desperados 3 a lot more. So you might be surprised, but there are some actual gameplay related similarities between these games. The first of which is the overhead isometric camera angle. Both games do this to allow you to plan your next steps and tactics to killing or bypassing enemies, albeit with considerable more freedom in Desperados 3, which has a complete and very useful free roam camera. Whether you're playing as one character at a time like in El Hijo, or any combination of several in Desperados, you'll generally be trying to stealthily maneuver your way past enemies without getting caught. The difference being that because of the more sandbox nature and size of the levels in Desperados, there are a ton, and I mean a ton, of different ways to tackle your objectives versus the more linear approach in El Hijo. El Hijo does not feature any real combat, and you'll eventually unlock several toys to help distract enemies in different ways. In Desperados, you could try to sneak past everyone and quietly hide bodies as needed, but many characters are also armed with both short and long-range weapons for your disposal. In Desperados, there are also plenty of environmental objects you can interact with, like releasing dynamite, dropping boulders, or poisoning a drink, just to name a few examples from the earlier levels. The team aspect of switching between characters also might have you mapping out multiple moves at the same time in order to get past a certain area. This actually reminded me of a game I played last year called Peaky Blinders Mastermind, which was all about the coordination of multiple characters to plan a strategy before carrying it out in real time. And if anyone is curious, I'll link to that here. On top of the main story objectives, there are also plenty of smaller non-story objectives that will have you attempting to replay the levels in completely different ways if you want, or trying to complete everything in a set time. I haven't done that yet personally, and I just tried to get to the end of the level, but this could mean playing the same level even half a dozen times to figure out how to accomplish all of these objectives. In many ways, though, El Hijo ends up feeling like a bit of an introductory game to the stealth and strategy experience, and something that would eventually lead someone to a game like Desperados 3, which is such a multi-layered and at times intense sandbox of a tactical stealth experience.
Finally, I thought he'd never leave. Need to work fast, get what I need, and leave before I get dragged to the altar. First, I need a key to the upper floor. I think she carries a spare. Bet she won't mind if I borrow it for a spell. The guards won't bother me so long as I don't miss.
The overall feel of both of these games is probably most closely tied to the level design, and ultimately where you will most likely make your decision on if either of them interest you. In El Hijo, the game levels are mostly linear with the occasional branching path to explore when freeing the children scattered about on each level. Where the game falls several notches down is the fact that too many of these levels look similar to one another, so many kind of bleed together. I also didn't like how much of the game is spent inside and through small corridors, which felt out of place and claustrophobic for me in a Wild West setting. In Desperados, I found the levels to be more authentic. The set pieces from even the first level on felt grandiose in nature, from train robberies gone wrong to a plethora of fun Wild West towns to explore. There are also just so many ways to tackle your objectives, and the openness of it all comes together in impressive fashion. One thing I did find kind of funny is that in both games, you have the ability to release a sort of pink smoke screen of sorts to distract enemies' sightlines. In El Hijo, this comes in the form of a cactus fruit about halfway through the game, and in Desperados 3, fairly early on, one of the main characters, you can throw her perfume to also do the same thing. I know neither game was developed at the same time, I just think it's kind of funny that both have the exact same mechanic for visually obstructing the vision cones of all of the enemies.
Now up the stairs and through the door to the library.
If you couldn't tell already, El Hijo is a more digestible and laid-back experience, so with nothing really holding it back or pushing its boundaries, it is simply not as ambitious as Desperados, so I don't have much to comment on there, despite there is an occasional awkwardness to the controls, leading to a quick fail at times. However, there are several technical aspects that I wanted to make note of in Desperados, the first of which is how the game impressively records and handles every move you make. At the end of any level, you'll get a detailed summary of every move you made played out in fast motion, which was one of the biggest joys at the end of a level for me. Some of the levels take hours to complete, so seeing it all come together in the end was such a fun mechanic. Also, the controls are adapted fantastically for a console, something that is really hard to do with RTS-style games, and partly why you don't see a ton of these experiences on console. Due to the difficulty of the game, though, there are a lot of things that can go wrong that you may have not accounted for, resulting in a swift or quick death. Luckily, the game has a well-implemented saving system that encourages you to experiment with different methods, and makes for a much less punishing learning curve than I expected. El Hijo also has an immediate respawn system, but with more traditional checkpoints scattered about on any level. Still, it came in handy at times when I would occasionally take several tries to get past a certain level. Both El Hijo, A Wild West Tale, and Desperados 3 accomplish what they set out to do. It's just that Desperado 3 is several notches of polish, strategy, and replayability beyond El Hijo, which honestly shouldn't be too much of a surprise given the intended audiences of these games. Some of you might say that El Hijo shouldn't be compared to Desperados because of this, but I did pay more for it, so I don't think it's completely unfair to do so. El Hijo is really a simplified, family-friendly stealth experience that anyone can play, but it lacked polish and became somewhat boring for me over its 30 levels, often playing out in similar fashion. Although this probably wouldn't matter for a younger audience, so I could easily recommend it to that crowd. Desperados 3, on the other hand, is a way more hardcore tactical stealth strategy game, and that could have worked against itself on the surface for having a high learning curve, but with several very different difficulty options, it is also one of the most digestible games I can think of when it comes to the greater RTS genre, and ultimately a much more impressive experience in the end. I highly recommend adding it to your collection, as it is often on sale physically in the $15 range. The Wild West will always have a place in gaming, and Desperados 3 is the clear winner here when it comes to these stealth and tactical experiences.
Oh, yeah? Well, I'm gonna show you your place in this world, you stupid...